Those people who are devoted to Jesus often read the Bible over and over again. And people who are devoted to Krishna often have a copy of the Gita and they read it over and over again. Master tells the story of his own father, who was an extraordinarily dedicated man, who never went out for entertainments. He went to his job, he came home, he lived quietly in his room. As Yogananda tells in autobiography, his mother died when he was 8 or 10 years old, and his father then assumed the role of father and mother to the 8 children in the family. And so he followed this very regular path of Dharma, doing the work that he did, coming home to his family, taking care of his family, and then he would spend all his evenings in meditation or studying the Bhagavad Gita. Mahatma Gandhi had almost no possessions at the end of his life. You see his little wooden sandals, and you see his copy of the Bhagavad Gita. The reason I mention this is because when you begin to study these holy books where the great masters have encapsulated the power of their teaching, it speaks to you over and over and over again. And even though you've heard the words, it's like you never understood what the words mean. And oddly, the way the scriptures speak to you over a long period of time is in itself the teaching. At one point, I was visiting Swami Kriyananda at the house he had in Gurgaon outside of New Delhi. And it was when 2003, 4, 5, when he was living there mostly full-time, developing Ananda's work in India. And he was giving a satsang at that house. There was about 30 people there, the ashramites mostly. And he made the statement, he said, because this world is so exceedingly complex, and I mean, it's complex, just look around the room, you can see how complex it is. And I am often struck, I live, relatively speaking, a simple life, but I'm so impressed by how complicated it is. Just grocery shopping, and then cooking, and then cleaning up after cooking, and then laundry is required, and then the car needs something, and then what I need to buy is not available. I have to go to another place to get it, and then the cell phone rings, and then the emails come in, and it's just like, I just want to be sitting on a rock somewhere, maybe with the Bhagavad Gita, but and that's just like my tiny little life, and there's billions of us, and every one of us has this whole story. So it's really easy to say that God's creation is exceedingly complex. So we say this is God's creation, so the entity that created something this complex, the human mind naturally thinks must be even more complex than its creation. And so in the satsang, Swami just said, we think because creation is so complex, the creator must be more complex. He said, but the closer you come to the experience of God, everything gets simpler and simpler and simpler. And he just said that in an answer, in not even in a particularly passionate way. He just answered a question, and that was the answer. The next morning, he said, I wonder how many people understood how vitally important what I said was. And then he went to speak even more. Because you see, the divine is singular. We talk about the one. The one God. Truth is one. The pathways are many to it. We attain union. We have this experience of duality, but in fact, it is single. Swamiji went so far as to say in the most just interesting to contemplate, and someday we will understand way, when the moment of God realization comes, and we know that there is only one reality, he said there is a moment of absolute loneliness. Just think about that. Just think about the feeling of loneliness that all of us are subject to. I'm all by myself. Nobody's going to support me. Nobody cares. Even the ones who love me the most, there's always some egoic separation until we realize God. So he expressed that at its maximum infinite potential. I am really alone because there is only one reality. And then the way Swami put it so sweetly, he said, but then bliss comes. And one realizes that in that singularity is also the singularity of absolute bliss. These are the kinds of things that the scriptures and the masters give us, and it keeps us busy for the rest of our lives trying to understand what that might mean. Now, going back to Swami's statement that God is singular, and there are lots of aphorisms about it. We only have one choice in life, which is to think of God or not. We only have one choice, which is either to love or to fear. We either move toward the light or we move away from it. Everything gets reduced down eventually till it's just one. So what happens, as I was saying, when we read the scripture over and over again, whereas the intellectual mind and the restless Gemini mind, which I've lived with for a very long time, for example, ever since I was born, and who knows how many times before that, I just think I need a variety. I mean, how can I just sit there and read the Bible like the dedicated devotees of Jesus would do? Or how can I just sit in my room and just have the Gita? But what happens is the closer we get to the center, the simpler it becomes. And the more the simple words actually speak to us, and the complexity is not fascinating anymore. You see, because what we are is, we are fascinated by this complexity. That's how Maya holds us. We are just fascinated by the complexity. Have you been to any of those ice cream stores? How many flavors of ice cream are there? And you just stand there and you look at all. Now we're in a pandemic, but you used to be able to get them to give you tastes. You're buying one ice cream cone, but you have to try 6 flavors to make sure you get exactly the right one, and then you compare it, and then you finally decide that I want half a scoop of this and half a scoop of that, put into it, because we're fascinated by the complexity. And we think that the more complex, the happier we'll be. And then he puts it back to us. So hearing the Gita today, it says, and I'm not going to be able to say the words exactly, but this is what I understood, that the divine, lights a candle within us. If we're sincere in what we're doing, God himself illuminates it. And what I heard in those words is just so interesting. It's like the divine comes in and illuminates. And what we're struggling with, what we're always struggling with, is some form of shadow, isn't it so? The light is always the same, but what creates a shadow is that something comes between the source of the light and the expression of that light. And that's us. That's me, that's you. We come, we make a shadow. The divine is shining on us all the time, and then something in us comes between the source of light and the expression of it. And what we express is who we are. The reality of sadness, the reality of anxiety, the reality of fear, it's not a thing, it's not a shawl, it's not a rock, it's not a chair. It's a vibration, isn't it? And what are we experiencing at all times? We think we're experiencing the external world, but we're never, really. We're never experiencing it. We're experiencing the vibration of consciousness that we are on. And we can be in the most beautiful place and be the most terribly unhappy, and we can be in the most terrible place and be happy. There's this book by Viktor Frankl, Dr. Viktor Frankl, which is a famous book, and justly so. It's called Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl was imprisoned at the age of 24 by the Nazis. He was an Austrian Jew, and on and on. So here's his experience. Now let me think. I think it's from Frankl's book, but it doesn't matter. It's a true story. Everybody in these camps, and he was there for 5 years or something like that, or longer, everybody's starving, everybody's emaciated, everybody's in terrible condition physically. When they were finally liberated, and I'm mixing up my sources, but the camp, when they were finally liberated, everybody was just skin and bones, and people, died the day they were liberated because they were so close to the edge. Except there was one robust, energetic person there. And they just assumed that maybe he just arrived, maybe he was corrupt, and had been taken care of in some other way. But it wasn't true at all. He was a prisoner. He was living in exactly the same conditions as everyone else. As I understand it, all of his family was killed in front of him, multiple children and his spouse, and then he was taken prisoner. He made a decision in that moment that with so much hate in the world, he would not be part of it. And he made a decision at that point that he would live in the power of love, because that was the only way he could, what would you say, be loyal to the legacy of the family that he had loved. He had to remain completely outside of the evil that had taken it all away. And as a consequence, he lived exactly the same life, but he thrived even physically. Now, such a story is, maybe there's one or two of them. But all we ever experience of this world is what vibration of consciousness we have chosen to live on. And now, in the Gita, it speaks of that. When we are sincere, there's many other verses around it. When we are sincere, when we are pure in our intentions, when we are doing our best, and our best is not, so often we go to war with ourselves. And I have been part of Ananda for more than 50 years. And disciplining ourselves, aspiring to reach heights, is not the same as being at war with yourself. We are the product. We are not the enemy. My own consciousness, my ego, my desires, my weaknesses. I'm God's child. He made me this way. He made me this way. He made me this way on purpose. And God looked upon his work and he said, it was good. This is good work that I did. There's so many, there's t-shirts that say, God doesn't make junk. He does good work. And it doesn't behoove us to reject ourselves. In fact, all self-development has to be based on a foundation of reality. We have to stand where we start. And we have to trust that we are who we are for very good reason. And God has a really serious plan for us. And this acceptance is not the same as becoming complacent. It's just being realistic. Because if every time anything happens, the vibration we live in is, have to stamp it out like this, that's not where enlightenment comes from. And this is this little verse in the Gita, and this is what caused me to think about reading scripture. Oh, God lights the spark. It's not us. It's not that I finally defeat the enemy and beat it into dust. It's that by my sincere aspiration, by my God reflecting vibration within me, then eventually grace descends. And it's such a paradox, it's impossible to explain. How we have to do the very best we can do, and in the very end you realize all I did was, my very best effort was just to arrive on time to the appointment, which may have taken all the effort that we had, but it's arriving on time for the appointment, and then God, just touches us. And when the transformation comes, by its very nature, part of the transformation is to realize that it was always God, He was always there. The instruction Swami gives in the Gita commentary for the Jivan Mukta. The Jivan Mukta is free. He's attained a state of God realization, and he's free while living. That's what it means. The Jiva is incarnated and free, but the old karma is still running, and the Jivan Mukta has to realize that it was always God. And the Jivan Mukta has to look back at all his incarnations and realize I was never separate. There was never an I that was acting. It was always the divine that was acting. And Swami, for some reason, always says, John Smith the pirate. I don't know why John Smith would have been a pirate, but 100 times I've heard Swami refer to John Smith the pirate. It was never John Smith. It was always God acting as the pirate. Now, a pirate the image of it is rather a despicable character, isn't it? He steals, he injures other people, he uses bad language, he drinks a lot, he's not a laudable character. But in order to be free, we have to realize it was always God playing that part. Now, from that rather lofty, extremely to me incomprehensible bit of instruction, which Swami gives out in some detail in the Bhagavad Gita commentary, the first time I read it, I said, Sir, I don't think those instructions are going to apply to very many people. Sometimes I make stupid jokes, which he never accepts when I do. He just looked at me very calmly, said, yes, of course that's true, but then so sincerely. But those to whom it does apply will find it very helpful. And then I always take a step back and think, who is this man, Swami Kriyananda? That I just have treated as my friend and ironed his shirts and cooked his dinner, and it's like, I'm not sure that I know what I'm dealing with here. They will find it very useful. Yes, sir. But it's also, you see, very useful for you and me. Because if, before we're liberated, we have to see that it was God's energy flowing through John Smith the pirate, and that's a lot of bad stuff, why is it not God flowing through right now, this one, who eats too many flavors of ice cream and becomes very impatient when people take too long, and why wait and make it so hard for ourselves? And how do we become Jivan Mukta? We don't become that way by separating ourselves from the divine that's flowing through us. God will illuminate us from within and dispel the shadow. And we have to help Him do that. We have to help Him in a way that seems so opposite from what we think. We have to help Him in a way by attuning ourselves. And this is where Swami started with this today. By attuning ourselves. Attunement, Master said, interestingly, even more than meditation. Some of you will fall away from the path, but it need not happen if you stay in tune. He doesn't say it need not happen if you do your 108 kriyas morning and night, absolutely without fail. He says if you stay in tune. And what we're trying to stay in tune with is that light that the divine is trying to illuminate within us. The word attunement, people make it far too complex. It's really not that hard. It's really not that hard to understand. It's like, what is the melody of the divine? The melody of the divine is, I love you. You're my own. You're my own child. And the melody on our side is, yes, to all who received him. And we think that God is weighing and measuring, but the very definition of Maya is the measurer. And you can only measure when you have this incredibly complicated world and everything has some sort of independent reality, and you compare it to this and it's bigger than that and it's sweeter than an orange but not as sour as a grapefruit. I mean, you have all this complexity that you have all just going on. They're measuring, weighing, measuring. But the closer you get to the center, the more it becomes one. And attunement is to move into that simplicity. I am a child of God. I am the disciple of a great master, if you have that grace. I am an initiate into Kriya Yoga. Or I am a poor dunderhead struggling along, but believe it or not, this is my best. You know, this is my best. What can we do about that? And we think that God cares, whether or not. But he doesn't. He wants us to be in tune with him, to all those who received him. And what is attunement? I am loved. And that doesn't mean that everything I've done is a really good idea. A great deal of what we've done is extraordinarily stupid, just incredibly stupid. Swami was giving a class once, and he was sort of, in his incredibly eloquent way, was talking about this and talking about that. And finally he just said, there's really no explanation for this strange so-and-so, blah, blah, blah. It's just that we're really stupid. And the word just sort of coming out of his mouth, we're just really stupid. And everybody sat for a moment, then we just burst out laughing, because it was just so incongruous. And Swamiji once, when there was a huge complicated thing going on, and he said, I don't have any explanation, I was stupid. That's what he said. He actually wrote it in a book, I was stupid. It was in the manuscript. I wrote him back and said, sir, you are many things, but stupid isn't one of them. And then he wrote back, he said, but I was stupid. I said, I know you were, sir, but it's incongruous. It's really not a good word. You have to find another word. So he did, in fact, in the end. But he really wanted me to just hear it. It's like, I'm stupid. We're stupid. But stupid is amusing, Do you think God cares? I mean, really, think about it. What is the intention of the divine? God wants us to be free. Why do the avatars come back? They want us to be free. I mean, it's hard to understand how passionately God wants us to be free. And nothing else matters. And to be in tune is to never lose track of that thread, and to never allow ourselves to doubt, even for a moment, how loved we are. I sometimes, in an exaggerated way, and perhaps in a way that you might consider slightly impious, disrespectful, I remember Master's poem, God's Boatman, I guess, or which one is it? Whatever, it doesn't matter. It has the lines in it that says, I will come back again and again, 1,000,000,000 times if necessary, on bleeding feet over crags of suffering, as long as one stray brother is left behind. Now, Master doesn't lie to us, and he doesn't engage in hyperbole. He tells the absolute truth. This is the avatar. This is the God-realized being. This is a God-realized being, a Christ, who says he has no intention, no reality except our freedom. And he will come back 1,000,000,000 times if necessary, as long as one of us, just one of us, is still being stupid. And he doesn't say, oh, how, what a drag. I finally thought I got all the chickens into the chicken house, and one of them is just out there still carousing under the moonlight. What a stupid chicken. He might say, what a stupid chicken, but he'll still come back and get us. Meditate on what that means. And we don't know anything about love. We love as long as it's convenient, and at the first hint of difficulty, we're out the door. We don't have any idea. Think what that means. But also, bear in mind, if you don't have a lot of confidence in yourself, he's never going to abandon you. Now that's what attunement is. Attunement is to know that so deeply that nothing can ever move you off of that. And it's easy to know. It's easy to know because it's a neon blazing truth right across the heavens. I am God's child. I am one with the divine. And as long as I sincerely long for that oneness, God himself, in the form of one of these great masters, will come and find me. As long as we remember that, we're always going to be safe. I have cheekily said to Master, I'm really sorry about your bleeding feet, sir. But if I am the last one, you're just going to have to come and get me. And Master reassures us, they like it when we talk like that. Because it means we've gotten the message. We've gotten the message. Isn't it frustrating? I certainly find it frustrating when I say something to someone, oh, I'd be happy to help you. And then they don't believe you. Oh, I'm glad to do that for you. And then they don't believe you. Oh, I'd like to give this to you. And then they don't believe you. I mean, I've had to grab people by the shoulders sometimes and say, I don't lie. Why would I lie to you? I'm telling you the truth. And the aggravation is not that they need my help. The aggravation is they don't believe me. And see, that's what the masters are constantly trying to get us to do. Believe me. That's what it means to receive. That's what it means to be in tune. It's to read the scriptures and believe it. Believe it so much so that no power on earth could ever take you away from it. That's where we're going. And we have friends in high places who are not going to quit until we get there. So that's why they call the gospel the good news. Isn't that fabulous? Jesus says to his disciples, because you are my disciples, the world will hate you. He says, but be of good cheer. I have conquered the world. He says, be of good cheer. Because we are children of an infinitely loving deity who will never abandon us. God bless you.
Many hands make a miracle, people climbing together. Soon we reach to the pinnacle of every mountain peak we hazard as one. We lift our hands to welcome the sun. Many hands make a miracle. Let's all join hands together. Life on earth is so wonderful when people laugh and dance and struggle as friends, and all their dreams achieve their ends. Many hands make a miracle, people climbing together. Soon we reach to the pinnacle of every mountain peak we hazard as one. We lift our hands to welcome the sun. We lift our hands to welcome the sun. Every morning when I greet the sun,
when I move forth through crowded ways. In my heart, Lord, ever so silently, I will always think of Thee. In my heart, Lord, ever so silently, I will always think of Thee. When I laugh, oh, and when I cry with pain, when my best friends misunderstand, in my heart, Lord, ever so silently, I will always think of Thee. In my heart, Lord, ever so silently, I will always think of Thee. Dear God, my God, I am Thine for eternity. Dear God, my God, I am Thine eternally. Though my path lead me over desert sands, though it take me through bitter storms, in my heart, Lord, ever so silently, I will always think of Thee. In my heart, Lord, ever so silently, I will always think of Thee. When I'm working and when in earned repose, let come victory or low defeat. In my heart, Lord, ever so silently, I will always think of Thee. In my heart, Lord, ever so silently, I will always think of Thee. Dear God, my God, I am Thine for eternity. Dear God, my God, I am Thine